And I'm here with Don Anderson. Don, great to see you. Finally
Great to
get
see
to do
you.
another show. It's been about a month, I think, since you and I did it. But you know what? It's still a Let's Go Brandon Wednesday because he's he's such an impressive figure. Impressive in how ridiculously bad he is at being president. And what's amazing is that I think some people are actually just beginning to figure this out. So, but let's start off with a little piece of news, right? Because this show was started in the middle of COVID lockdowns, right? And so much has happened since then. And everybody's learned so many lessons, or have they? Because apparently, and this is something we talked about briefly yesterday, but I thought I'd bring it up again here today. The Centers for Disease Control recommends that Americans over 6 months old receive COVID boosters.
Over 6 months before
Yeah,
they even walk.
yeah. Which, and of course, the rate of fatality and severe illness for COVID for 7 month olds is what? It is actually so minusculely small that I think um, it's almost not measurable. It rounds to zero,
So,
and that is true for literally everyone up until, like, I think you get into the 30s or something, then it ticks up a little bit. But 7 months to 30 years old, um, the booster, which they approved by testing it only on mice. That was something we reported yesterday that the USA Today reported. They bypassed other tests because everything's gone so well with the booster. It's been perfectly safe, as we know, and and so totally effective in recent years.
so just what efficacy and safety data do they have on said 6-month-olds? I wonder.
Apparently, mice told them everything they needed to know. I guess what? So whatever the equivalent in years for a mouse is to a 6 month old, that's where they figured out that they didn't need the booster, and we're all set. So, I mean, I know that all these different social media outlets that we tend to stream to don't like it when we provide our own opinions. So we're just actually providing other people's opinions stated in news stories and making sure that everyone understands that this is what your government has decided for you based on, well, here's Alex Berenson, somebody that'll pretty much get you banned on YouTube, but I'm just going to say it anyway because someone's got to say it. Come on. He actually went and quoted, of all people, and the one time I think it could actually be appropriate, he quoted John Kerry. Do you remember John Kerry and the Winter Soldier speech that he did in front of Congress? I think it was 1972 or
He had
something.
3 Purple Hearts, remember?
Yeah, yeah, from all that Swift boat action he saw. He no, well, here's what's interesting is that, and I'm going to try to see if I can't get the actual article while we're talking here, but Alex quoted John Kerry as saying, "Who wants to be the last man to die for a mistake?" And of course, he was talking about Vietnam. But then Alex goes on to point out how much data, especially from around the world, like what have other countries decided on the issue of the mRNA vaccines in particular and the booster. What have they said and done and decided? And he quoted John Kerry just saying a lot of them seem to have decided that they're done with pursuing this and compelling all this and spending enormous gobs of money on it. And here's what he said in his article. He said, American mRNA fanatics and health bureaucrats just made their worst decision yet. Said that the Centers for Disease Control is about to push a new round of COVID boosters on healthy teenagers and adults, even as the rest of the world admits defeat and gives up on the jabs. That's what he's saying. It's not me expressing just my unique personal opinion. This is actually what he said. And I think he backs it up, and then he quotes John Kerry, because if doubling and tripling down on a failed policy and failing to refusing to accept reality that's obvious to almost everyone is not the indication that you've got a fantastically good policy in place. He said that Tuesday afternoon, the CDC recommended all Americans receive mRNA COVID boosters this fall, except, of course, for 6-month-olds and younger. And the CDC director, Dr. Mandy Cohen, said that she, her husband, and her preteen daughters will all be rolling up their sleeves to get their updated COVID-19 vaccines, along with their flu shots. I hope you and the people you care about will do the same. This is, by the way, the same CDC that had a massive breakout of COVID about a month ago after they had a gathering at the CDC. So they sure do know. And in a slide presentation by the CDC yesterday, Moderna simply ignored the fact that imprinting from the original jabs makes our immune systems produce antibodies tailored to fight the now extinct original coronavirus variant, no matter the specifics of the mRNA and the booster. By refusing to disclose how much better its new booster works against the SARS-CoV-2 than the new variant. So they went to the CDC and didn't tell anybody how much better it works, according to this report. Pfizer didn't even bother to offer data on how well the new shots work in humans. Instead, it presented data from 20 mice. This is where science is now. 20 mice, wow. And the data from 20 mice is enough to order or recommend that 330 million Americans get a shot of a medicine.
Well, here's some good news. I know that I talked to a lot of people who completely bought in before. Shots, masks, the whole 9 yards. And I've not had a single one say they're going to go get another one. They're saying we're not doing it anymore. Now, that's short of apologizing to me. Nobody has done that. Nobody has said, you were right. You were right. But they are pretty much saying not doing it again. So we have to take the victories where we get them. That's pretty cool. I'm talking about people who were like all over it. So I'm pretty thrilled with that.
Yeah, no, I think that people are seeing reality now, and that's good. It's good when people start seeing reality and starting to acknowledge something. It's a slow process to get people to catch on to that. I'm posting the link to the Just the News article and also the Alex Berenson Substack, and people can read it and decide for themselves. One thing you'll find is Alex Berenson repeatedly posts data, very good data, actually, data that comes from other countries, because unfortunately, so often in the United States, we didn't bother measuring a lot of this information. We didn't bother doing studies on many of these things to figure out if they were true. We simply have people like the CDC doing experiments on like 20 mice and saying, see, we told you, go do it. And he goes much more deeply into what the data is saying about what does and doesn't work, what the side effects are and are not, how often they've been reported. And that math has led most of the world, including Japan, Germany, Britain, and Australia, to stop recommending COVID boosters for children and teenagers. In fact, the latter three countries no longer recommend COVID shots for the vast majority of people under 65. So,
well, the thing is, when you have a completely gaslit and emotional population, then they are basically need to be hit between the eyes with a 2x4 before they'll start listening to reason. Something drastic and ugly has to happen. And this is not being reported.
Well, and then people have to have it. It has to happen to them, because they aren't going to have it reported to them into the news.
Yeah, it's got to be them or personal relationship. And now you pretty much talk to people, and they know people who are sick, completely train wrecked, or worse, and that's what it's taken.
And by the way, if you want to go and look at the slide presentations that we were talking about that were given at the CDC, that Alex Berenson cites, you can click on the links in his article, which will show you. You can go watch these presentations yourself, and you'll see that what he did is he verified this and then stated this. You will not see this, I think, presented in the vast majority of the media that unfortunately most people will end up watching. So also, as you said, the efficacy and the side effects, all this stuff, it's like the biggest problem we have right now is getting to the truth and finding out the facts that we should already know. It's a different thing in 2020 when people just didn't know anything. And I still think people have the right to make their own decisions on what they do with their own lives. However, you know, now the data should exist. And we can't get it in most cases, especially through the vaccine adverse events reporting system, which is now really, even Congress can't seem to request the data. We paid for it. It's a requirement of the law, and we can't get it. So I don't know. I just think that, well, you know, the biggest dysfunction here of all is the media, because none of this stuff that the government's doing would work if we had a functioning media, which is a great lead in to our next story.
Yeah.
Our next story is that the White House put out a letter drafted by the Biden White House Legal Counsel's office and put out by the communications office of the people that I now think, I used to kind of joke about this. We used to have this term for this, the White House spokesperson, the press secretary. I used to call him spokes liar, right? Sometimes I said spokes idiot, but most of the time spokes liar. And now they just unabashedly, I mean, I think they'd even say, you know, that's probably, yeah, sure. I love it. Good title. Because in this letter, they warned the media, who apparently they like to order around as de facto state media, to ramp up their scrutiny of House Republicans for opening an impeachment inquiry based on lies. Now, of course, the one thing that they aren't doing here is they aren't actually stating, well, this was stated and that's a lie. They're just saying it's lies. Why don't you guys look into it? And it has a real smell to it. So Democrat law professor from George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, wrote an article entitled "Marching Orders: White House letter tells media to ramp up their scrutiny in response to impeachment inquiry." Now, Kevin McCarthy said yesterday that the reason why they are ramping up the impeachment inquiry, as well as the chairs of the Comer of Oversight, Jim Jordan of Judiciary, and then I think Ways and Means, and I don't remember who that was, but they are saying that the reason why they're doing this is because every piece of evidence that they request that demonstrates factual backing for what they're saying is being slow walked and held up in the judiciary. And this gives them leverage to get to the truth because they have reached a critical mass. And as Kevin McCarthy said, why is this impeachment inquiry being done? Well, he listed out 5 reasons for it. But the summary that he gave was because our public offices here in Oregon, in the United States, are not for sale. They're not for sale. It's against the law, and it's against the Constitution. Specifically, it's impeachable offense. So he said that only recently, media has only recently admitted that President Biden has been lying about denials relating to his son's influence peddling business. They also, Biden and his associates have been spreading false stories about the Hunter Biden laptop. As we know, Biden actually stood in front of TV cameras in the back in 2020 in the second debate and said it was Russian disinformation, the laptop. So he lied and he won. So he stole the election by lying. There you go. I don't even have to add anything to that. But now they're actually trying to order the media to go out and be their attack dogs and attack rather than report what is being said by the House Republicans in their investigation. And they found that email, right, from, I think it was December of 2015, which literally has Joe Biden meeting with these guys, and having direct knowledge, and therefore turning around and acting upon the knowledge that he had of the money that was coming from the oligarch in Ukraine. So this is pretty ugly. It just gets uglier and uglier, I think.
Yeah, I just don't see the media defending Biden. I mean, this gets into the politics of it. I don't think they want him running for president either, because I don't think he can. Well, I don't think they think he can win, but he's not going to step aside apparently. So they're going to have to move him aside. I think,
this might be setting the stage for that.
Yep,
that's true. However, you just made a great point that I don't think you intended, which is that the media, who spend a lot of time denying, deflecting, and defending Biden up until now, well, you can just tell how desperate they are, because the facts are so bad that they actually aren't even asking the media to defend Biden. They're asking for the media to go out and attack the Republicans, because they figure, well, at least we can get them to go do that. And it doesn't have to be true. Just attack them.
Right.
Because it's not working anymore to defend Biden when they have email or travel itinerary or evidence of meeting or testimony of phone call, conference call between so-and-so and so-and-so that included the then vice president. And it's getting darker and darker. And actually, it's very interesting, because I'm just reading headlines that are sitting on the Just the News website homepage. Hunter Biden scored meeting with father and business associates inside vice president's home at Naval Observatory. So that's one story. Hunter Biden sues ex-Trump aide for allegedly helping publish emails and other laptop content illegally, they claim, which is fascinating, because that's the laptop they claim was Russian disinformation, didn't exist. Why would they be concerned about something? Why would it be illegal to publish something that they believe is false, and therefore is completely irrelevant? An IRS agent's notes, one of the IRS whistleblowers, quote the prosecutor, Weiss, who's supposed to be prosecuting Hunter Biden, claiming that he's not the deciding person. He's not the person who decides on whether there's Hunter Biden charges or not, which is actually what a prosecutor's job is. The prosecutor is not supposed to be going and asking someone else if it's okay to prosecute someone. They're supposed to prosecute. So this one, they're going to get to the bottom of, and they're probably going to find out it was Merrick Garland or somebody in the White House or some combination of both. And every few hours now, there's another headline, and it's getting worse and worse for Biden. He richly deserves it.
Right. Yeah. In a halfway fair and balanced world, he's off to prison. I mean, I don't see how anything else happens. But they've been slick. I mean, they've been getting away with this for a long time. I think he's finally hit the end of the road, because I think his own party won't support him anymore, because they want him out of there. I mean, Trump still has 50% approval. In spite of everything they've done, he's still at 50%. I'm not sure if that's a testament to how good he is or how bad the opposition is. Either way, that's the case.
Yeah, definitely, because but Biden is hovering around Jimmy Carter approval territory right now, and I don't think there's a floor. I think there's now a ceiling, really, because what is Joe Biden going to do other than just disappear into his basement and stop saying anything to make his popularity increase?
Well, you can't point to any. You can't speak to any accomplishments, and there's literally been nothing.
Oh, wait a second, Bidenomics. Everything's great.
You can lie. I guess you can continue doing what you do best, but you can pretend like inflation is only 5% or whatever the numbers are throwing around now. I mean,
and it went up, by the way.
Oh, did it?
Again, yep. So it's been going up 2 months in a row, which is interesting, because we were told it was much better, and it was. So I think, they may not raise interest rates more in the short run, but it says here inflation rises for second month in a row after a year of cooling off. So
people will eventually vote their reality. I mean, the media has never been lying like this before in our entire country's history that I can think of, right? You can get away with that lie for only so long. People go to the grocery store and they may be able to tell you the percentage, but I know I can just lick my thumb and look out and put it out the window and tell you it's got to be up about 15%, just regular groceries. I don't care what they say, and the gas station is the gas station, obvious for everybody. They're just lying. Um, what can you say? And people eventually are going to, I think anyway, respond to that. At least a percentage that aren't insane. And there's always going to be a 25% that are insane.
That are
And those,
nuts.
yep,
Yeah.
those are the ones that are going to wear the mask and all that other crazy stuff. Maybe that percentage is higher in Portland. And we have to always remember we're in the craziest part of the world, but they're even responding here.
Well, and I think the ones who, I think even some of those people that might be, you know, like, yes, I'm going to wear masks and get boosters and do whatever I'm told, and you know, Trump is terrible and Biden is great. Those people actually aren't receiving any news about what's happened. I'm not even sure Joe Biden is receiving the news about what's happening to Joe Biden.
Mhm.
But here's the 5 simple terms, 5 simple justifications for this impeachment inquiry. Biden made false statements to American public to get elected since he took office, including denying his family did not get money from communist China when in fact it got millions. 2, President facilitated his family's enrichment as Barack Obama's vice president by joining phone calls and meetings with his son Hunter's business associates. Eyewitness testimony revealed that the president joined multiple phone calls and had various interactions with his son's business partner, something he claimed never happened. But they did only talk about the weather. Just remember that they only the weather came up on these calls. 3, Biden presided over a family that collected nearly 20 million in foreign proceeds, some from oligarchs of concern to the U.S. that were already on our list of people that were suspicious and being investigated, and had more than 150 banking transactions flagged as suspicious. So these were flagged suspicious by the State Department and the Treasury Department, I believe, back in 2015, 2016. And then somehow they went away. Number 4, the FBI received information in 2020 yet to be corroborated or debunked that Biden was the beneficiary of a $10 million bribe from a Ukrainian company called Burisma Holdings that was under investigation for corruption and who had hired his son. The allegation is concerned because there is also evidence Biden used his official office to coordinate with Hunter Biden's business partner about Hunter's role in Burisma during a time when the vice president withheld a $1 billion U.S. loan guarantee to force the firing of Ukraine prosecutor investigating Burisma. And lastly, by the way, that was the subject of the 2020 impeachment, which they said was corrupt for Trump to call for it to be investigated. And apparently, no wonder they were worried about it. There was fire to that smoke. Lastly, since becoming president, his administration has taken actions to thwart or minimize potential investigation and prosecution of Hunter Biden on criminal charges, including, quote, a sweetheart plea deal that President Biden's Department of Justice tried to sneak past the public, unquote, this summer before the judge rejected it. And there's all kinds of evidence around that, and they're subpoenaing this information. Now, bring this back to Oregon here. There's some relevant news. U.S. Representative Cliff Bentz, the 2nd Congressional District here in Oregon, says he supports the Biden impeachment inquiry, which, as we know, is an inquiry. It's an attempt to find fact, not to file impeachment charges yet. It's to find out if there's grounds for that. And so this is, he said this in a town hall where he was being asked different questions, and he made this statement. And he also said, and he said, I trust Kevin McCarthy. And if he's saying that this is the next step, I'm going to be with him on it. I had already heard enough, though, as a lawyer, I thought, well, that's odd about some of the things that the Biden family have been doing. Bentz said he didn't know of any link between odd behavior from members of the Biden family and Biden himself as president, but says he hasn't been briefed since July on the details of this. So, and Lori Chavez Dreamer of the 5th District described the impeachment inquiry as a momentous step. And they haven't answered. She hasn't answered any specific questions about the inquiry, but I think this is why it's coming forward right now. It's that these committees can do their jobs, which they should be able to do their jobs. Oversight, judiciary, and Ways and Means all have roles in overseeing this. It is a search for facts and the truth regarding serious allegations against President Biden. It should be treated solemnly and without political maneuvering or grandstanding. Like all Americans, I want the truth to come out through a fair, dignified, and just approach. And while this plays out, I remain focused on keeping the federal government open and functioning so there are no disruptions to services for Oregonians. So that's the statement from our two Republican members of Congress. Democrats, I don't know that I've heard anything from them, but we'll get to one of them here in a second. Congressman Bentz also said during his town hall that he is concerned that a government shutdown is likely. He says he hopes it doesn't. I do not support government shutdowns. He understands why the Freedom Caucus is concerned and is pushing this because they think there's too much spending, and this may be the only way to start curtailing it. But he says that there are 11 remaining appropriations bills, and he can't predict the fate of those right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think the Biden administration wants this because there's so much other bad news. They need a distraction, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I agree. Distractions are good, and maybe I'm being too flip when I say this, but I'm not sure what's bad about a government shutdown. That means they can't do stuff to us for a while.
Well, so what the Freedom Caucus said is until we can figure out how to scale back our spending and get within these budgetary limits that they, negotiated with the White House during the debt ceiling, that non-essential spending should not take place. So they're willing to go forward with essential spending, but non-essential spending, which there's like entire books that describe of all the non-essential spending that the government does, stuff where it's not essential. It's not critical to the functioning of the United States and its economy or national security.
Which Kevin, it begs the question: why did a government function then, in the first place?
I know. Well, that's
a bigger question.
That's why they always the Democrats always play a shell game with what is essential and not essential. But I guess we're going to find out in the middle of this debate what this is deemed to be, and then we'll see. But in the meantime, I think the Biden administration desperately needs distraction from all of the evidence gathering that's starting to roll up and the information that's coming out. It is approaching the word devastating. Yeah. But it's interesting because back here in Oregon, there is a Democratic congresswoman who is drawing some attention, not for her comments about impeachment, although she did at one point urge and say that there was actually no compromise on making sure that we could get information disclosed about President Trump and his documents and all the document investigations going on. She went and made a big speech about this. However, what's fascinating is that because she's turned around and she's been stonewalling an investigation into her own actions, which seem to be increasingly troubling for her. She's trying to defy Freedom of Information requests for information that she conducted on her personal devices, but was conducting official state business. And she's refused to turn over these records for 8 months, which could reveal her collusion with the donors from LaModa. Remember the bags of cash, people that got Shemia Fagan in a situation where she felt she had to resign. Well, here's the latest, and I don't. This is impactful. Val Hoyle won't provide her personal phones to the state agency she once ran, which is the Bureau of Labor and Industry, so they can go and remove or capture copies of the information of official business. She says that she's going to take care of it. She'll do it for us because you can trust her. And she's the one who went on a rant about how you can't trust President Trump to handle all this type of information and disclose it himself. but apparently she's not in favor of that for her. And I find it interesting because in the same time that we're seeing headlines like this about Val Hoyle, doesn't this sound a lot like Joe Biden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to remember as a group collectively, maybe there's an odd person here and there who isn't this way on that side of the aisle, but they are without principle. They'll use principles when the principles operate to their favor, and when they're not, they don't have them at all. And that's precisely what you just described.
Yeah, and I think she's got some state agencies helping her with some cover so that she doesn't come under pressure to actually do the right thing, which, of course, the right thing should be easy. And she also said that she missed emails asking her to turn the information over for 8 months. And there's a whole, and this is the Willamette week. Who's not exactly rooting for Republicans. They're not a bunch of, and they recount the correspondence where she says that, she's replying to, who is this? Dietrich. I don't know. I guess Dietrich is somebody that is involved with the Bureau of Labor and Industry and the probe to find the information. So I don't see who this Dietrich person is, but Kelsey. It's the Boley Records custodian, Kelsey Dietrich. Sounds suspiciously like the head of the National Archive at the national level, but for the Bureau of Labor and Industry. And so there's this back and forth and this kissy face where they're like, oh, I'll get it to you. No problem. Well, I'm going to talk to my lawyer. And, I think I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you by the end of the month. And my attorney advised me that we perform the production of public records ourselves so as to ensure we are fully compliant. Nothing is overlooked because we wouldn't want to miss anything. And that's something I can make sure of by doing it myself. Yeah. I'm super trustworthy. This is the same person who, as I said, went on a rant because she said Donald Trump wouldn't cooperate with agencies that were trying to get documents.
Lack of principles. All you can say.
I'm going to post this this press release from the NRCC because everybody should have a look at this, because the 4th district is a district clearly Republicans have been aiming for and feel like they have a pretty good shot at. And it was still pretty close in the last election. I think this could be one of these situations where this is like a festering sore of a corruption scandal. There's already plenty of evidence. And by the way, a lot of this stuff doesn't fall under federal law, but it does fall under state law, right? At least based on what we know right now, like the Bureau of Labor and Industry. Mm-hmm. Geez, where is the Attorney General of Oregon on all of this? Apparently she doesn't have time to dig in and investigate any of this. She's super busy suing Fox News because she doesn't like how they reported the 2020 election. She has done a press release that states Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum today filed a stockholder derivative lawsuit against the board of directors of Fox Corporation, blah, 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 because the Oregon Public Employee Retirement Fund is an investor in Fox. And they feel that they have been harmed by this. They've harmed the PERS fund. So that's what she's spending her time on. She's like one of the only ones in the country that's even bothering to do something like this, because she doesn't have time for real investigations and crime. No time. Very busy.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, when the level of personal pain rises to a certain level, and maybe the tolerance for it is just higher in Multnomah County and places like that than others, but it's rising. I mean, you got constant store closures, the crime rate's out of control. You call a policeman, you can't get one. I mean, you can't go to the park without stepping on a needle. There comes a point. The schools are an absolute disaster. I think we're approaching a breaking point.
Yeah, and what does the AG have to say about the utter catastrophe that is Measure 110? Well, she's one of the people that made sure that the ballot title passed muster, that duped everybody in this state that voted for that into thinking it was just about taxing cannabis to fund drug treatment.
Wow.
and in little print, you know, decriminalized class whatever drugs, which happen to just be, oh, I don't know, crack, cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and crystal meth, which is now inundated our major cities, and now we're the probably one of the top destinations for all these drugs because people do it and there's no consequences, and they can just sit around, blow fentanyl smoke in your face as you walk out of your office building in downtown Portland. And you can't, they're not even allowed to regulate where people smoke fentanyl. They can regulate where they drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes, but fentanyl, you better not say anything to that person because they're a victim. It is insane. And you're right. The AG has no time for this stuff. She's focused on real stuff like virtue signaling about 2020 election reporting. Now, there is some good news on the judicial front. And I want to make sure we bring this out. You know about what's going on in New Mexico, right? Where the governor of New Mexico has decided to declare a public emergency in the Albuquerque area, the largest city in New Mexico, and an emergency that forbids open or concealed carry of weapons in the city of Albuquerque in the wake of a drive-by shooting of an 11-year-old boy outside a baseball stadium recently.
She unilaterally, suspended the Constitution. Pretty much said that.
Well, and guess what? Actually, somebody figured that out. Yesterday, we reported that the Attorney General of New Mexico, a Democrat, refused to defend the governor's order. So even Democrats in New Mexico are running for cover on this one. But today, a federal judge with jurisdiction in New Mexico blocked part of the public health order. It's a public health order. You know, remember how we said COVID would be used later as a cover for all kinds of other stuff?
Yeah.
A public health order. This judge, David Arias, issued a ruling that against the 30-day order that would have barred open and concealed carry within the city and would have imposed fines on violators. And by the way, people are openly in rebellion against this in the city. In fact, the city probably just got safer because people that might not have been walking around with their open or concealed carry firearm around, who's going to start shooting at 11-year-old kids and drive-bys when somebody might be right nearby to, take you out.
I saw people on video just walking around. Yes. Obviously, they're in blatant defiance, which they should be. I don't know if have the police decided we're not enforcing that? I thought I saw that too, that we're not enforcing.
Yeah, there's a sheriff that said, no, not doing that. Sorry, no. Yeah. And this is what David Darnell has talked about a number of times on our show in the past. And kudos to him for saying it. He says, I will not comply. I am not obliged to comply with unconstitutional government decisions. And even a California Democrat congressman by the name of Ted Lieu, who's an incessant gun control advocate, actually quickly condemned the New Mexico governor's order saying, I support gun safety laws. However, this order for the governor of New Mexico violates the U.S. Constitution. No state in the union can suspend the federal constitution. There's no such thing as a state public health emergency exception to the U.S. Constitution. So, when a progressive Democrat who wants to get rid of your guns actually comes and says that, maybe you're in trouble legally.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, that was like one of the most outrageous things yet. You almost wondered, though, that was one of those, let's test the waters and let's send her out there to go test the waters on this. Because it's so insane. It's so insane.
Well, where's the Oregon Attorney General also sounding off? I mean, she has an opinion about everything else in the country. She wants to make sure that she defends the right of abortion everywhere else in the country, while also trying to make sure that you can come to Oregon, so we'll pay for it. But she has no opinion about this, apparently. I've not seen anything. If somebody's seen it, please post it. I want to be fair and honest about this, but I've seen no remark from the Attorney General, the top cop and top law enforcement officer in the state of Oregon, about having the Second Amendment removed from people.
Well, the calculus is this. How does this help me or hurt me? If it can help me, then I'll say something. If it can hurt me, it's not about right or wrong.
Politically, yeah,
Politically.
yeah. The hell with the law. The hell with what's good politically, because that's your real job as elected officials to make sure that the
Say elected,
politics are good.
right?
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, speaking of politics and what's good for the state of Oregon, this headline caught my attention. Oregon to receive $3.8 million for overdose prevention. This is from, I guess, the Centers for Disease Control. And we know a lot of money is being spent on the fentanyl crisis and homelessness, which obviously are related, and the crime which spawns from it. And you think, well, that sounds like a pretty good thing, because it's like they say here, Marcy Hertz from the CDC said that we've seen this shifting epidemic first to prescription opioids, then to heroin, now to fentanyl and polysubstance use, which is combining them all, driving much of the opioid-related epidemic. She says fentanyl is now often combined with other drugs like meth and is increasing the rate of hospitalizations and deadly overdoses. And they're seeing a lot of people who don't actually know that fentanyl is in their drugs. And she cited the CDC data about the dramatic increase in fatal overdoses. And now we are 34th in the nation in total overdoses, although I bet for a state our size, it's much higher.
Yeah.
However,
per capita makes you wonder.
Yeah. But here's the thing. This is not this is not getting people off of drugs. It's not getting the drugs off of the street. It's just basically paying for Narcan and for data collection, which I think falls under the title harm reduction. Mm-hmm. Which every time I hear that they're spending more money on something that really falls into the area of harm reduction. They said, for instance, they're going to have test strips where you can test to see if there's fentanyl in your otherwise toxic drug mix, and that it's a super good idea. The more they spend their time focusing on this, the less they actually solve the problem. It's like all harm and no reduction.
Yeah. Well, until you see, I think two things have to happen. Number one, the first job of government is protect the citizens, right? So people have to be taken off the streets. Number one, they have to do that. And the second thing is, once they're off the streets, you got to have a methodology in place for how to clean them up, and recognize that some of them can't be cleaned up. Their brains are too damaged by now. So we got to figure out a way to take care of them. I mean, that's the take care of them. And I'm not talking about take care of them sleeping under the steel bridge either. That is, until you see something like that, they're not serious. They're just not serious.
Well, and I think we know that the problem's been getting worse as they pour more money into it and engage in more harm reduction, because it's still harm.
Right.
And I'm not seeing the reduction.
Well, they're helping them stay in their squalor. Everything you see helps people stay there. You give them goodies so they can get cleaned up while they're getting, you give them food, they give them this, they give them that, but all that stuff does help them stay there.
Right. Because they got $3.8 million this year. You know what they got last year for the same thing? $3.6 million. You know what the tragedy that would happen is that next year, when it would probably be more like $4 million, it might not come if they solve the problem. We can't have that.
Yeah. No. Well, if nothing else, too, it's basically a marketing plan for other people like them. They're attracted to Portland. I'm going to not say Oregon, because it's not really an Oregon problem. It's certain counties in Oregon. And they come here because of the legal system and the ability to do crime without getting caught. It was just like, I think I told the story earlier, back in the 80s when the Crips and Bloods got clamped down on by the LA police. They looked north and said, I hear the cops in Seattle and Portland are soft. Let's go there. And then that's when the problem came up here. It's the same thing.
I wouldn't even say the cops are soft. I would say the cops aren't allowed to do their job. So the appearance is what you said. Yeah.
Good correction. The attorney, the legal folks are soft on keeping people in jail.
Yeah. Well, and the DA is not interested in prosecuting them when they do commit crimes while they're on drugs, which is a common thing because that's how they pay for it. Well, we got just a couple more news stories, which I think are quintessential stories for this phase of the election cycle. Today, a Democrat state senator by the name of Senator Elizabeth Steiner, unfortunately my state senator, she's going to campaign to become Oregon's first female state treasurer. And it sure is nice that they took word for word I'm sure the press release from Senator Steiner's campaign, emphasizing just how important it is that we have the first female state treasurer, because who cares whether or not PERS is insolvent or whether our money is being invested correctly. Apparently, it's all Fox News' fault anyway, according to the Attorney General. But she says, and of course, everybody knows that, of course, since she's a doctor, she is very qualified to run a giant investment fund. Everybody knows that that's what doctors are really good at. And so she said, I'm running because being treasurer in the right way to help Oregon be the strongest, healthiest state in the nation. We just talked about how healthy they are with fentanyl all over the streets, which has always been my goal, she said. As a family physician and the state's chief budget writer for over 5 years now. That would explain a few things.
That's a qualification.
Yeah. She's good at increasing budgets. That doesn't necessarily translate into increasing financial returns in a private investment marketplace. But anyway, and she said, I've seen the toll that financial insecurity can take on people, leading to physical, emotional, problems. Many Oregonians are unexpected medical expense away from missing a car payment, losing their home, or not being able to pay for their childcare. And if we help Oregonians build financial security, we can prevent lots of problems and break multi-generational cycles of poverty. Pat Doris said, that all sounds great, except I think most people, when they think of the treasurer's office, they think of PERS and the billions invested. They don't think of personal savings. That's what Pat Doris, the reporter, said. He goes, yeah, it's absolutely true that a treasurer is responsible for making sure that the public employee retirement fund is invested well and continues to grow so we can meet our obligations for Oregon's retirees. That's not all of Oregon's retirees. It's Oregon's public retirees. But she said they're responsible for savings programs, college savings, post-high school education, blah, 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 blah. So in other words, her entire statement justifying her reason for running has nothing to do with the job, and seems to mean that she fundamentally doesn't understand what the job is about, and cites qualifications that don't speak to whether or not she can do this job. And so, but she's a Democrat from Northwest Portland, and they began to talk about how super awesome it is in this article that she can be the first woman to hold the office, which of course, a person's genitalia is what really does the most to make sure that they are absolutely qualified for an office. We know nowadays, if it's not that, then it's probably some other specious qualification, right?
When are people going to get tired of this first business, this identity politics thing?
Yeah.
The first like this, the first woman that, is just old. I just don't understand why people would vote for somebody based on what they look like. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, or what they think they are, because one thing I want to remind everybody that it's HB 2002. I believe that's the bill that we talked about, the one that enshrined in Oregon law protections and funding for kids, in particular, above the age of 15, to get have their genitalia cut off and replaced with something else. And David Darnell last night described as gender mutilation, but it's and that is what many people believe it is. But this was the gender affirming care bill, and guess who was the primary person advocating for this bill? It was Senator Steiner. Maybe what she should do, if she really wants to be novel and grab some headlines, is declare that she is now transitioning to, I don't know, some other gender. It doesn't have to be male, because there's, hundreds of genders, as we know, and just declare that she's transitioning. I mean, maybe every week she could transition to a new gender and then put out another press release talking about how she could be the first person that's transitioned to, I don't know, hermaphrodite or whatever.
Why stop? Why not just throw in race too?
Yeah.
Race, gender, the whole nine.
She
You could be like
as African American.
you could be like Bjorn in Lord of the Rings, a skin changer, like whatever.
That's right.
Whatever you
You
need.
could take that Swahili and give her her next statement explaining why she has no idea what the job is about in Swahili. That'd be pretty admirable. I think that would garner some headlines too. So this is what the Democrat Party is offering the state of Oregon now, is a state senator who, for all of the things that I don't think made her a good state senator, she is actually going to be an even less helpful, less effective state treasurer. But I guess she just wants the job, and I'll bet that the public employee unions trust her with the PERS funds.
I mean, it's amazing. Can you imagine these people if they were going to be on something like American Idol and they're going to get up there and sing, and then they made their criteria this kind of stuff? You see how harsh they are in terms of judging people and their talent. Or you look at like pro sports and how harsh that is in terms of, and I say harsh, it's just reality. Here's the competition. If you can't run the 100 meters in this time, you don't qualify.
Well, Marjorie on our feed here is saying, I think gender stuff should not be paid for by insurances and our taxes. They are on their own. Well, that bill already is encoded into law that they're going to require health insurance to pay for it. Therefore, you. But also, when that's not a possibility, they've got the Oregon Health Plan, and they're going to be able to cover it by the government. So I guess Senator Steiner believes that her job is to make sure that they go and get as much money out of the investment funds to be able to cover that cost. Something tells me that is something maybe the public employees would be less sanguine about. Call me crazy. But good luck with that, Senator Steiner Hayward. We look forward to having a really good Republican run against you, and maybe start talking about how a fund that seems to assume that we're going to make 8% annually in compounded rate of return a year can actually produce that rate in a market that has its problems. You know, maybe she's going to be a big crypto person. You know, crypto's going to make a comeback.
Sounds awfully optimistic given the history of the market, but call me crazy.
Well, our last story here is a piece of news which is interesting because I just heard it, but not surprising. Mitt Romney, a U.S. senator from the state of Utah, who used to be at some point in the past not only a governor from the state of Massachusetts, but also who ran for president in 2012 as the Republican nominee for president and lost narrowly to Barack Obama, has decided that he is not going to run for re-election to the Senate in 2024. And I think he's like 78 or something like that.
But well, that's young.
But he's saying it's time for a new generation of leaders. And he spent 25 years in public service of one kind or another. At the end of of another term, if he were to win, he would be in his mid-80s. Now, he doesn't look 78.
I'm in mid-80s these days. That's
77.
Like, you know,
he's 77.
77. That's middle age in politics.
Yeah. But well, in Democrat politics, it's spring chicken. But here's the funny thing about it is, he's probably been seeing some pretty dreadful polls about his reelect chances and how tired people are of what he's been doing, especially with regard to those impeachments. He became kind of a never Trumper in all of this. And then as time went on, it seemed like he seemed to be casting some pretty not so conservative votes along the way, or certainly voicing policy positions that I don't think we could reconcile with the 2012 presidential nominee, Mitt Romney. He's going to see a challenge, and I think he's probably retiring at the right time, and good for him.
Yeah, and I don't see Utah. It's kind of amazing here. It must have been the name recognition thing, because that's a conservative state, or at least it used to be. I just don't see them electing someone like him again.
Well, I think, he's probably facing somebody who's actually conservative nowadays and would give him a proper challenge at the ballot box in the primary. So why go through all that hassle? I just think that this is something we should encourage when it's the right time for somebody to transition into the past. And also that we can get a real reliable conservative elected to the U.S. Senate and then hold the Senate. I think Utah is a state we can make sure that it's a very good chance of it being a Republican that prevails.
Mhm.
So any last thoughts on the cavalcade of news and giggles that we managed to produce tonight?
Yeah, I just think, look, I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. I mean, a lot of things are going positively in spite of what the media says. I mean, you look at it looks like Biden impeachment thing is finally rolling down the tracks. People have figured out that the whole vaccine thing was, well, I hate to use the word hoax, but I don't know what other word to use. At
We'll
least
just
it's been
say that
blown.
they're realizing that there's something wrong with all of it.
Yeah, people are saying the inflation, the crime, the border. You go down the list. I mean, the fiasco that Ukraine has become, or was from the beginning, but now it's very obvious. There isn't a single thing you could think of that this administration, and I would include the Democrats across the country, where there's been a positive thing you could say. And no amount of lying in the media can cover it up when it's right in front of your face. I mean, people are getting their houses broken into, they're being held up at gunpoint. There's neighborhoods you can't drive through. It's just, you can't buy groceries out knowing it's up 15%. Gas is through the roof. It's just,
And as we saw in the state of Virginia, if you complain about your teenage daughter being sexually assaulted by a trans student, and you scream at a school board for lying and causing that to happen, maybe you're the one going to jail because you're actually a domestic terrorist for standing up for your daughter.
Yeah, and the schools are horrendous across the country. So, in fact, I saw something like it was the New York Times. I think we may have saw that public school attendance is down 10% nationally. Now, the hilarious thing about that article is they tiptoed around the real reasons. They tried to say it was due to people being afraid to come back. They got spoiled by not being in school. They were out because of COVID. But when everybody could look around and see the real reasons, people found out how rotten the schools are. And nobody wants, well, I shouldn't say nobody, but the vast majority of people don't want their kids to come home thinking their gender other than the one they left home with the night before.
Yeah.
So
meanwhile, they can't do math to calculate anything, and they can't and they can't read the agreements they probably had to consent to in order to have their genitalia modified. I mean, we got all around is just total, storm. And but then that's positive that people are starting to recognize this is the beginning of a change in direction. And frankly, some of the Democrats like Val Hoyle and President Brandon are being exposed in an obvious way for what they are and what they really intend for our country. So you're right. That's good news. We'll keep bringing this good news to everyone as often as we can. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday every week on the Captive Audience. Thanks, Don, for joining me here tonight.
Yeah. Absolutely. When the lights come on, the roaches run.
That's right. And we're going to point out where the roaches are running and who they are. And so we'll be back on Friday with another episode of the Captive Audience. It should be David Darnell and a guest that to be determined. We'll see, because Sunny is at the roundup. So she's kind of occupied right now. And that's why she's not here tonight, why I stepped in, and Don and I took care of it tonight. So we'll see everybody at the next episode of the Captive Audience. Have a great rest of the week and a very good night.
Take care, everybody.